My name is Sandra Malbon, and I'm the spiritual leader of Unity. And I get to schedule guest speakers once a month, sometimes twice a month. And I always love when Bonnie is our guest speaker. So Bonnie and I have been friends for, I don't know, a long, long time. I think we both moved here about the same time. And we became friends, and I just absolutely love and adore Bonnie and admire her huge heart and her profound spirituality and understanding. And so it's always an honor when she is our guest speaker. So I'd like to introduce now Bonnie Gordon.
I need to move around. Thank you, Sandra, for that wonderful, amazing introduction. And thank you, Unity of Salt Lake City, and Sandra for inviting me to speak here today. And thank you, all of you, my dear beloved friends and spiritual family, for being here today. I am grateful to be amongst all of you, master beings and beloveds. So I would like to start with the story of how I came to Salt Lake City, Utah. Actually, how God orchestrated me coming to Salt Lake City, Utah, because I had no plan to be here even a week before I was here. So it was June 19th, 5 a.m. in the morning, 1994, and I threw my kids into the back seat of the car and I flew off to Madison, Wisconsin. I drove from Massachusetts to Wisconsin straight, only stopping for the most essential pit stops. 24 hours and 19 Coca-Colas later, I arrived. And I was so exhausted, yet strung up with caffeine, I didn't know whether to sleep or run around the block. But the week got better. I spent time in the pools. I wasn't sure if I spent more time meditating. It was a meditation type retreat. Meditating, swimming in the pools, or at the 24/7 all-you-can-eat free ice cream bar. But then one morning I was in an absolutely expanded, euphoric meditation. I was extended out to the infinite reaches of the universe, filled with bliss and joy. Every cell in my body was smiling, a Gomer Pyle-style smile. When all of a sudden, right before me appeared a golden angel, shimmering, robes of gold, radiant, brilliant angel, bearing an uncanny resemblance to the director of the meditation retreat. And this angel tapped me on the shoulder and said I was needed at the lobby. Well, I gathered a little bit of my energy field into my body so I could move. And I began walking down the corridor, and it felt like I was walking on air, like I was 2 feet above the floor. I couldn't feel the floor. I was so ecstatic. I felt like I was soaring and flying and gliding down the corridor. I was so blissed. Till all of a sudden, faster than the speed of light, my infinitely expanded energy contracted inward to intense fear. It was so fast, I set a record. Because right before me in the lobby was the entire Madison, Wisconsin Police Department, backed up by the entire local area SWAT team. And standing beside the chief of police, and this is no exaggeration, was my very own father. We need to back up about 5 or 6 days from here. I have a rewind sound. Rewind 5 or 6 days. My father is sitting in his living room, minding his very own business, watching the Patriots.
Yes.
He's in New Hampshire? Yes. When God himself appeared to my father and said, George, your daughter is in a horrible, awful, dangerous, horrible, mind-altering cult. They're teaching her that God is an all-loving, unconditional, forgiving, benevolent God. You've got to go and save her. You've got to rescue her. Or you will never, ever see your daughter or your grandchildren ever, ever, ever again. Well, my father, being the hero that he is, and with his great love for his daughter, jumped on his golden eagle called Cessna, and he flew out, hence the lobby. So with a blink of an eye, I was driving back east again. 24 hours and about 10 Coca-Colas later, as we were sharing the driving, I arrived in my dad's home in New Hampshire, and he immediately locked me up in a high tower and cut off all my hair. Actually, the hair cutting was when I was around 10. I don't want to go into that. He only let me out of the tower for my scheduled appointments for the cult deprogramming psychologist meetings. But then one glorious day, my prison guard, tower guard father came up to visit me, and he had good news. He said, my younger brother David called and wants to invite you and the kids out to Las Vegas. And now we need to rewind a little bit again. About a month earlier, my brother was sitting at the Melting Pot restaurant minding his very own business when God herself sat down in the booth next to him, and she gave herself a huge portion of fondue. Isn't it comforting to know that God herself loves decadent food? Very comforting. Well, after she had fully satisfied herself, she told my brother that he needed to call me up and invite me and my children to Las Vegas. And he said, absolutely. And she said, wait a minute, there's one thing. Very, very important. You can't mess up my plan. I have been orchestrating since June 19th. You have got to invite her on September 10th, the week of her son's 3rd birthday. So he did. And my father sat in the tower with me and said, a very strange question. Bonnie, would you like to go? Locked up in a tower, visiting the cult deprobing psychologist, or Viva Las Vegas. My one suitcase was packed. I put my clothes in there. My kids were little, so I added their clothes in. All we needed was one suitcase, right? And we were off, and we were in Las Vegas. We had a glorious week. We celebrated my son's 3rd birthday. And then the next day, I got a phone call. My friends that I had met at the cult earlier in the summer, they, due to totally unexpected circumstances, and I'm sure God had a conversation with somebody, had to leave the cult, and they were returning to Salt Lake City, Utah, where they had previously lived. And they invited me, do you want us to come pick you and the kids up? Maybe you want to move there. Maybe you want to live there. And I asked the most realistic, sane, reasonable question you'd ask. Where in the world is Salt Lake City, Utah? I had never heard of it. After they assured me that it was one of the 50 states, I asked the next most logical question, what's it like in Salt Lake City, Utah? And they said, there's lots of beautiful mountains and there's lots of Mormons. And I asked the next most reasonable, logical question, what in the world is a Mormon? I had never heard of a Mormon. This was before the Olympics, before the 2012 presidential elections. Well, they told me straight up, aptly described a Mormon as people who have lots and lots of children who wear hand-me-down clothing. So I thought about it. You know, I love mountains, and I love children, and I love free things. So pick us up. Pick us up. So they did, and I landed here in Salt Lake City, Utah. 1994 September, 20 years ago from now. And I landed with my one suitcase. All my possessions fit in one suitcase. Yes, I came here with a sack over my back. I was a hobo. I had no car, no home, no family, no friends but the two people I had barely known from the retreat. I had no job, and I had barely any money. But I felt abundant. I was surrounded by this amazing, magnificent beauty, these mountains. I had all these new experiences. I got to see a snail for the first time. I was like 3 years old on my knees with my kids as it crawled, it glided across the sidewalk. I was in awe. I saw a quail for the first time with its little hat. Everything was new. There was new possibilities, new opportunities, new adventures. I had an abundance of youth. I had an abundance of health. I had an abundance of hope and optimism. I had an abundance of freedom. I was 29 years old, and I had the freedom to move 2,000 miles across the country with my 2 children to a place I had never, ever known before, with nothing to my name. I had an abundance of insanity. And if any of you know a woman, she can have lots of multiple emotions at the same time. I also had an abundance of fear. I had to provide and protect for these 2 little children. So I did what any logical, sane, of course we realized I wasn't wholly sane, woman would do. I said, kids, the heck with it all, we're going to go live off the land. But I can't take credit for being that environmentally conscious. What I did was I gardened my consciousness. And before I tell you my gardening secrets, I'm going to go over a couple things. First of all, this is nothing new. All of you have heard these gardening principles 1,000 times maybe. You're all masters. We're all walking this together as masters. I'm up here right now telling my story. A moment ago, Diane was sharing her divine, magnificent gifts. Next week, Sandra will be sharing her story. We're all the same. We're all God. You all know this, but I want you to listen with a beginner's ear, because maybe it's said in a little different way or in a little different context that something will click for you and make a difference. So try to listen newly. And the second is I use this gardening tools that I created for wealth, because at the time that's what I needed. I had an abundance of everything else, but I had no money. But you can use it for anything, for success, for health, for love, relationship. And the third thing is let's figure out what this consciousness is that we're gardening. So I want to invite you all to kindly close your eyes for just a moment. And I want you to just become aware of the human being sitting in your chair. You might be aware of that human being's body. Maybe that human being's thoughts that are passing through, or some of the emotions that are passing through that human being. And I want you to recognize that this part of you that is aware of the human being is your consciousness. It is God. That which is aware of the human being in the seat is God, nothing less. It is your infinite divine awareness. God is with you, as you, in you. And this God, this consciousness, is infinite. There's no limit, infinite in power, infinite in potential. And this is you. This is your God self.